So in June of 2017, Travis Kalanick got pushed out of Uber, the company he built, and by his own account, it happened just weeks after he buried his mother. 9 years later, in July of 2026, that same company, Uber, quietly put a reported $100 million into his comeback, and Ben Horowitz called it the biggest check he has ever written. The company is called Atoms. It doesn't make an app. It makes robots that, in his words, have jobs. And for 8 years, thousands of its employees weren't even allowed to put it on LinkedIn. So why are kitchens, mines, and 2 million-pound haul trucks suddenly the hottest thing in AI? Let's get into it. Okay, so to understand Atoms, you have to start with the worst month of its founder's life. Travis Kalanick co-founded Uber, built it into a global company, and then in June of 2017, after a run of scandals and an investor revolt, he was forced to step down. His own words on the Atoms website are, quote, "I left Uber in 2017, heartbroken. Less than a year later, in March of 2018, he took $150 million of his own money and bought control of a tiny Los Angeles real estate company with a deliberately boring name, City Storage Systems. The last all hands he ran had 20,000 people. The next one had 6. And here's the part I love. He almost called the new company Super, as in you go from Uber to Super. And he thought, no, that cannot be a thing. So he did the exact opposite, full stealth. For years, employees were not allowed to put the company on their LinkedIn because, he says, he wanted to build without the noise of 2017 in the system. But the boring name was a clue. And here's where it gets clever. His whole framework is this. A computer has 3 resources: a CPU that manipulates bits, storage that holds bits, and a network that moves bits. Now treat atoms like bits. What manipulates atoms? Manufacturing. What stores atoms? Real estate. What moves atoms? Transportation. Uber was the network. City Storage Systems was the storage layer. So the food business was never the whole idea. It was, in his words, the first computer, a food computer. That's the cave. Now let's look at what he was building in it. So what is a ghost kitchen actually? The company buys a cheap warehouse or an old retail box, splits it into 20 or more small private kitchens, wires in the software, and rents them to delivery-only restaurants. Kalanick says they now have, in his words, many hundreds of facilities in about 30 countries. And I want to be straight with you here. He'll tell you himself, quote, "We were a bit early on CloudKitchens. In September of 2023, the Financial Times reported the buildings were only about half full, with staff cuts and some warehouses closed. But here's the math that explains why he never let go. Your $15 bowl somehow becomes $30 by the time it hits your door. Every courier drop is roughly another $12. And food, he says, has a 30-minute half-life. So unlike an Amazon warehouse, the cooking and the delivery have to happen in the same building. And that building has to be about 15 minutes from you. So that's real estate, right? Then you take the labor out with robots. And I know, robots in a kitchen. We've all heard that pitch before. So here's what's actually there. A company called Lab 37 in Pittsburgh, run by Eric Mayhofer, who used to run Uber's self-driving unit. Their machine is called the Bowl Builder, and by their own spec, it turns out a bowl every 18 seconds. In fairness, so far it's mostly running Lab 37's own test brands, but it's real. And then the network layer, which he genuinely calls autonomous burritos, boxes on wheels that bring your food. His claim is that a robotic courier takes that $12 drop down to about $1. And that's the whole bet in one sentence. Can you make a quality meal so cheap to prepare and deliver that it approaches the cost of going to the grocery store? And underneath it all sits the software layer, Otter, which its own site says more than 100,000 restaurants use. Now hold that framework, because he's about to point it at a mine. All right, so this is the part where a lot of people on this channel are going to hear the word mining and think, oh, Bitcoin. No, Adams Mining is real rock, and the way he got into it is a company called Pronto AI, founded in 2018 by Anthony Lewandowski. If that name rings a bell, yeah, same engineer from the Waymo versus Uber trade secrets case. Convicted on one count in 2020, pardoned by President Trump in January of 2021, and whatever you make of that chapter, what he's built since is real. Pronto makes retrofit autonomy kits for the giant haul trucks that carry rock around a quarry. Kalanick was already the largest investor. Adams bought the company outright in April of 2026, and Lewandowski's title now is head of Adams Mining and Transport. So, does it work? Here's what's on the record. Heidelberg Materials, a giant in building materials, has had these trucks running at a quarry in Lake Bridgeport, Texas. Over 2 million tons of limestone hauled autonomously in under 8 months. On a mixed fleet, Caterpillar and Komatsu trucks running the same system. They're expanding to Indiana and a second Texas site this year, and in July, Hitachi Construction Machinery signed a memorandum with them and literally described Pronto as, quote, part of Adams. So it's early, but it's not a slide deck. And then there's the photo. Kalanick on stage next to a fully loaded haul truck, and he says, I'm standing next to a TCP packet. A 2 million pound machine moving rock is, in his framework, just a packet moving on the network. His pitch to a gold mine CEO is one line. Would you like 20% more gold per year? And he says, quote, we haven't heard no, but they say prove it. And I actually think that's the healthiest sentence in this whole story. Prove it. He also says they're not buying the mines. His line is, what is a mining company? It's actually real estate. Which brings us to the money. So, where does $1.7 billion actually come from, and what did it buy? On July 22nd, 2026, Adams announced $1.7 billion of equity, led by Andreessen Horowitz, with Ben Horowitz joining the board. The way Kalanick tells it, he actually had several separate companies with separate investors, and he showed up at A16Z, quote, like the guy in a trench coat with a bunch of watches. And their answer essentially was, we want all of it. Ben's only real question, in his own words, was, is it going to be one thing? So who's in? A16Z, Bain Capital Ventures, Fifth Wall, a handful of others, and Uber. About $100 million from Uber, per the information in TechCrunch. And that check was written around January, months before the name Adams was even public. And then, separately, there's a debt side. Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and Barclays are listed as debt partners. Look, when you own buildings and heavy machines, you borrow against them, the way a real estate company does. The size of that facility isn't disclosed, and neither is the valuation, so we're not going to guess. Ben Horowitz's own line, on stage, the biggest check he has ever written. And in early August, Gautam Gupta, Uber's finance chief from 2013 to 2017, was announced as CFO. Now, TechCrunch used the word gauzy for some of the claims, so let's just sort it. Operating today, CloudKitchens, Otter, Picnic, ProFood, and Pronto. Real but early, Lab 37. And then Transport, which on the website still just says, announcement soon. Kalanick says they carved Transport out as its own company near the end of 2025 because, in his words, funding autonomy through a food company just wasn't going to work. What we can see is, on August 4th, a partnership with Joby Aviation to buy and develop vertiport sites in 4 states. That's the honest map. So the question a lot of you are thinking, is there a token? No. A chain? No. We searched and there is no crypto angle here at all, and I'd rather tell you that than invent one. So why cover it? Three reasons. One, follow the capital. The same A16Z that runs one of the biggest crypto funds in the world just led its founder's biggest ever check into machines. Bain Capital Ventures and Fifth Wall, both with crypto and tokenization bets behind them, are in too. Two, the real estate line. Kalanick keeps saying storage is real estate, and that a mining company is really a real estate company. If you follow tokenized real-world assets, that should sound familiar, because tokenization is the finance side of the exact same intuition. Land, buildings, and machines becoming first-class digital objects. And look at the debt partners: JP Morgan, Goldman, Bank of America, Wells, Barclays. JP Morgan and Goldman especially are the same names running the tokenized deposit and settlement pilots we cover here. And three, the contrast. A lot of crypto is promising decentralized machine networks, what people call DePIN, where a token coordinates the robots and sensors. Atoms is the opposite model: centralized, bank financed, one founder, one board. I'm just telling you to watch which one puts working machines in the field, because that's the scoreboard that matters. So what do you actually watch for over the next year? The transport reveal and Heidelberg's two new sites. And I'll leave you with the humblest thing he said. Asked who's the best in the world at industrial AI, he said the name rhymes with on, Elon. And then, quote, "People say Elon's the GOAT, I'm a baby goat," which, for Travis Kalanick, is a pretty remarkable sentence. So let's put it together. A founder gets pushed out of his own company, and instead of disappearing, he goes silent on purpose. 8 years, thousands of people, a boring name, no LinkedIn. Comes out with one framework. Manufacturing is the CPU, real estate is the storage, transport is the network, and $1.7 billion behind it. What's proven? Kitchens, restaurant software, and 2 million tons of rock hauled by trucks with nobody in the seat. What's promised? The robot couriers and whatever transport turns out to be. Now the action items, because there are real ones. If you're studying robotics, AI, or operations, atoms.co/open roles had 249 open jobs when I checked, from San Francisco to Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Riyadh. If you're a developer, Otter publishes its full API docs and an MCP server, and Atoms runs an engineering blog with open source repos, all public, links below. And if you want the source material, read the vision letter, then watch the A16Z fireside and the David Senra episode. Every number today came from those, and the Notion page has every link. When a builder says prove it, hold him to it, including this one. If this helped you see atoms clearly, do me a quick favor and subscribe. It genuinely helps. Drop a comment on which of the three computers you'd bet on: food, mining, or transport. I read every one. The Notion page with every source is linked below. See you in the next one.